So I was once coaching an oil and gas executive, and in the process was doing a series of interviews with his team to learn his strengths and weaknesses as a leader. And the organization had set me up in a beautiful corner office in their company headquarters. And the day went great. I interviewed everyone, I got some really wonderful data. And the next week, when I was on site talking to my leader, he pulled me aside and told me about a very interesting rumor that had cropped up. Apparently, the people that were sitting outside of the office had decided that I was a recruiter, and I had been hired by the company to interview everyone in the office to see if they were going to keep their jobs. You can imagine my surprise and my amusement, followed by my shock and horror that this had gotten so out of control. And this is something that all leaders find. One damaging rumor per week, on average, is what managers will hear or experience. And it can be a very pervasive problem. Typically, the reasons that rumors come up are a general lack of trust and a general lack of transparency that their leaders are showing their employees. And the problem with rumors is that they hurt, in the bankable leadership language, both people and results. Here's why. On the people side, if employees feel like they're not being told the truth or there's something happening that they're not aware of, they are more likely, when the time comes, to throw you under the bus, to resent you, to feel like some nefarious intention is afoot that they don't know about. On the results side, if employees don't know what's going on with your business, with your strategy, with your operations, your financials, they cannot have the right line of sight to contribute the right results to the organization. So how can you as a leader encourage transparency in your company to prevent these damaging rumors from happening? There are two types of transparency that any leader has to master to get those benefits. The first is called transparency of information. What that means is, do your employees have a clear line of sight into the decisions that your company makes at the higher levels? For example, the strategy of your company, the decisions for how to optimally operate the company, and how is the company doing financially? So the CEO of a company who I interviewed for my book had a very, very tough couple of years during the Great Recession, during 2008 through 2010. And she realized throughout the course of this crisis that her employees had no idea how the company was doing financially. They would cut a budget, or they would conduct a situation where they had to reduce the resources in a department. But employees wouldn't know what the bigger picture was. And so she would say, here are your targets, here's what you have to do, but they wouldn't have any context for why they were making these decisions. So she gathered all of her employees in the front lobby of their building and said, it is time for us to be more honest with you. We have not been intentionally withholding any of this financial information, but we know that we need to tell you everything so that we can get through this together. And lo and behold, they're doing phenomenally well. They did weather the recession. And when I spoke with her for my interview for the book, she reflected that she didn't know if they would be where they are now if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't been financially transparent with their employees. The second type of transparency is called transparency of intent. And what that means is, do your employees understand why you, their leader, are making the decisions that you're making? And it's pretty obvious why they need to know this. If you make a decision, for example, to cut 10% of the budget, they might decide that you have nefarious intentions, and the next thing is going to be a layoff, or you're just doing it to get to some end game that they don't understand. But if you say something like, listen, I am going to have to cut 10% of our budget, and the reason for that is we will not be able to continue to operate as a company. I am not doing this to make your life harder. I'm doing it because I know that we need to do this and tighten our belt so that we can remain viable. It's a completely different conversation. One leader that I interviewed, a CEO for my book, had a situation recently where their executive team had decided to go to a new email system. And the reason they decided to do this was they thought it would be less expensive, and they actually thought the system would work much better than the old system. So they went through the process. Their IT team did a great job of moving them to the new system. Lo and behold, everyone hated it. The CEO was getting 10, 20, 30 emails a day saying, we can't believe you did this. This is an awful decision. And everybody was getting very upset. So she, ever the bankable leader, decided that she needed to communicate with her employees what their intentions really had been. They had not been to save money so much that employees were not using the email system that they needed to use. Their intention was not to make their lives more difficult. So she sent an email to the entire company to clarify why they did what they did. She said, "We are so sorry that this happened. We actually did this because we thought it would make your lives easier. And we're hearing your feedback that it's actually made your lives much, much harder." And of course, they went back to the old email system and everyone rejoiced. But the more important part of the story for me, as a scholar of bankable leadership, is that she made her intentions clear. She didn't allow her employees to make up rumors or stories or conspiracy theories. She addressed their concerns head on and said why they had done the things that they had done, and they also made it right. So how can you create increased transparency in your team? I'd like to give you 5 actions for unmistakable transparency, and you can read more about them in my book, Bankable Leadership, or by going to my website, bankableleadership.com. Number 1, make sure that you, your manager, and your peers are completely aligned in what you'll be communicating to your teams. Now, this should probably go without saying, but I am shocked on a daily basis how often this happens, where a meeting will take place with a series of decision makers. Each person will go out and communicate to their team the outcome of the meeting, and everyone will tell their team something different. So there's an easy way to determine at the end of a meeting whether everybody's on the same page, and that's just to ask the simple question, what have we agreed to tell our teams based on this meeting? So make sure that you're aligned as a team and as your peers before you're transparent with your teams. Number 2, you have to be transparent about transparency. I had a mentor once who told me the following wisdom. He said, if you know something and you can tell your team, tell them by all means. If you don't know something, tell them that you don't know and make a commitment to find out. If you know something but can't tell them, be clear about that and tell them what the timeline is that you think you'll be able to give them that information. Number 3, you as a leader must build regular structure and systems to get information out to your team. I've seen many a well-intentioned leader have a moment of inspiration and say, I need to communicate more with my team, and then have one meeting with them and never again. Obviously, this doesn't help on a regular basis. So whether it's a daily huddle, a weekly stand-up meeting, a quarterly town hall, you need to put regular systems in place to share information with your employees. Number 4, you need to actively seek out and squelch rumors. I worked for a boss once who was incredibly bankable, who was this very, very senior level leader and would attend employee meetings. And at the end of the meeting, she would always ask, what rumors are you hearing? And the things that she would hear would always astound her. But what she would be able to do in asking that question was put it out there to the employees that she wanted to know what they were talking about. But if they said, here's the rumor I'm hearing, they didn't even say, here's what I think is happening. They were able to put the rumor out in a pretty innocuous way. And what she was able to do, and also a very innocuous way, was to squelch it and say, it's very interesting that you heard that. Here's what's really going on. So actively squelch and seek out rumors. And then last but not least, number 5 is to know when to not be transparent. I know that sounds somewhat counterintuitive, but let me give you an example. Let's say that your department is restructuring and employees know that something is coming, and maybe you have the best of intentions and you decide to share the half-formed org chart that you're creating. And then 2 weeks later you change it, and then you tell them again. The chaos and lack of trust that you can create just based on that, sharing the not fully formed org chart and then changing it, can be absolutely disastrous. I've worked with companies that have had good intentions and shared half-baked ideas or half-baked plans only to go on and change them. So when to not be transparent is a matter of saying, is this 90% of what it will be, or will it change? And if it will change, what's the point at which we know we can confidently share this with our employees so as not to create anxiety and alarm? So again, know when not to be transparent. So these 5 actions should help you be more transparent with your team, and I encourage you to read more about it in my book, Bankable Leadership.